The room is sealed from the outside. Heavy doors of carved wood press against stone, and soldiers stand watch in the corridor beyond. No one enters without permission. No one leaves at all. Inside, a woman moves slowly through the dim chamber. She has already outlived the empire that once depended on her. The city outside is quiet now. Too quiet for a capital that only weeks earlier commanded fleets, armies, and kingdoms across the eastern Mediterranean. The woman pauses beside a window, cut high into the wall. She listens. Footsteps pass outside, distant voices, the disciplined rhythm of soldiers who no longer serve her. For the first time in more than 2 decades, Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, descendant of the Ptolemies, last ruler of a dynasty that began with Alexander the Great's generals, has no power left to command. Only time remains, and not very much of it. History often remembers Cleopatra through spectacle. The brilliant seductress of Roman imagination, the queen who dazzled Julius Caesar, the lover who bound Mark Antony to the fate of Egypt, and finally, the tragic monarch who died by snakebite rather than submit to Rome. But the reality of her final days was quieter, colder, and far more revealing about how empires destroy their enemies. Because Cleopatra did not simply lose a war, she lost to a political system that understood something terrifyingly effective. Defeating a rival in battle is not enough. You must also control how their story ends. By the summer of 30 BCE, the long struggle for the Roman world had reached its final chapter. For years, Rome had been tearing itself apart in civil war. Armies once loyal to the Republic now fought under the banners of rival commanders. Alliances shifted, loyalties dissolved. Victory depended as much on propaganda as it did on swords. At the centre of this conflict stood 3 figures whose ambitions had reshaped the Mediterranean. Julius Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, the brilliant general, Mark Antony, and Cleopatra, ruler of Egypt, the wealthiest kingdom left in the ancient world. Their fates collided at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, when the combined fleet of Antony and Cleopatra faced Octavian's forces along the western coast of Greece. The battle ended in disaster. Ships burned in the water. Commanders abandoned their lines. The alliance that had once threatened Rome collapsed into retreat. Antony and Cleopatra fled back to Alexandria, their power unravelling with every passing month. Octavian followed. When his armies finally arrived at the gates of the Egyptian capital the following year, the outcome was no longer in doubt. Antony's forces defected. The city surrendered, and the last independent kingdom of the Hellenistic world fell under Roman control. But one problem remained. Cleopatra was still alive. For Octavian, this posed a dilemma that was both political and theatrical. Roman victories were not merely announced, they were performed. A triumph in Rome, the grand procession through the city celebrating conquest, required a living symbol of defeat. A captured king, a humiliated rival, someone the crowds could see with their own eyes, as proof that Rome had prevailed. Cleopatra would have been perfect, a queen who had ruled beside 2 of Rome's most powerful men, a foreign monarch whose wealth had fueled the war, a figure already surrounded by scandal and fascination in the Roman imagination. If she could be brought to Rome alive, the triumph would be unforgettable. But Cleopatra understood Roman customs well enough to know exactly what that meant. Decades earlier, she had visited the city while Julius Caesar was still alive. She had seen the aftermath of Roman victories. She knew how defeated rulers were displayed before the public, paraded through the streets, stripped of dignity, and often executed after the spectacle ended. For someone raised in the ancient traditions of monarchy, the humiliation alone would have been unbearable. Death was preferable, and Octavian knew it. That knowledge shaped everything that followed. After the fall of Alexandria, Cleopatra was placed under guard within the palace complex that had once served as her seat of power. The arrangements were meticulous. Roman soldiers watched the entrances day and night. Anything that could be used for self-harm was removed. Servants were monitored, messages were controlled. Even the queen's attendants were separated from her for long periods. The objective was simple: keep her alive. Yet survival under these circumstances carried its own cruelty. Cleopatra's kingdom had vanished almost overnight. The political network she had spent years cultivating, generals, courtiers, diplomats, had dissolved in the face of Roman authority. Only one leverage remained: her children. Cleopatra had 4. Her eldest son, Caesarion, was believed to be the biological son of Julius Caesar himself. The others, Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene, and the youngest, Ptolemy Philadelphus, were children she had with Mark Antony. To a Roman ruler determined to secure his power, those names mattered. A boy who could claim Caesar's bloodline was not merely a child. He was a potential rival, and Cleopatra understood that better than anyone. During the days following her capture, negotiations unfolded between the Queen and the new master of Egypt. The details are fragmentary in the historical record, scattered through the writings of authors like Plutarch and Cassius Dio. But the general outline is clear. Octavian offered assurances. If Cleopatra cooperated, if she accepted Roman authority, if she prepared for the journey to Rome, her children might be treated with mercy. The language was careful. Promises remained vague. Futures were discussed without guarantees. For Cleopatra, every word carried weight. She had spent her entire reign navigating dangerous political currents. She knew when a negotiation concealed something darker beneath the surface, and yet she also understood that her choices were rapidly disappearing. Meanwhile, the fate of Mark Antony had already been sealed. Defeated and believing Cleopatra had abandoned him, he attempted suicide. Mortally wounded, he was brought to the Queen before he died. A final tragic meeting between allies who had once challenged the greatest power in the Mediterranean. After Antony's death, Cleopatra stood completely alone. Outside her chamber walls, the machinery of Roman victory was already turning. Egypt's treasury was catalogued. Officials prepared reports for Rome. Ships were readied for the journey west. Everything suggested that Cleopatra herself would soon become part of that cargo. Weeks passed under constant supervision. Ancient writers describe the Queen speaking with Octavian at least once during this period, attempting to negotiate the future of her children. The meeting appears to have been polite, controlled, almost diplomatic. But beneath the surface lay a reality neither side could ignore. Octavian could not allow Caesarion to live freely, and Cleopatra knew it. At some point during those final days, whether through rumour, observation, or simple political instinct, the Queen appears to have reached a conclusion. The future she hoped to protect no longer existed. If she went to Rome, she would become a symbol of defeat. If she remained alive, her son would likely die anyway. The balance she had tried to maintain for years between survival and sovereignty had collapsed. Only one form of control remained. On an August morning in 30 BCE, Roman guards approached Cleopatra's chamber, as they had done every day since her confinement began. Nothing seemed unusual. Servants had delivered food earlier. No alarm had been raised. The corridors of the palace were calm. When the door was finally opened, the scene inside was silent. Cleopatra lay motionless upon a couch. 2 of her attendants were nearby. One had already died. The other, according to later accounts, was still alive long enough to adjust the Queen's royal headdress before collapsing herself. The exact cause of Cleopatra's death has been debated for more than 2,000 years. The famous story of the asp, a venomous Egyptian cobra hidden among a basket of figs, became the most enduring version, repeated by Roman writers and later immortalized in art and literature. But ancient historians themselves were uncertain. Some suspected poison concealed in a small container. Others doubted that a snake could have been used so easily. The truth may never be known. What is clear is that Cleopatra died before Octavian could move her to Rome. In doing so, she denied him the spectacle he had hoped to display before the Roman public. Yet even that act of defiance did not fully escape the reach of Roman narrative. When Octavian celebrated his triumph in Rome the following year, Cleopatra still appeared in the procession, only now as an image. An effigy of the Egyptian queen was carried through the streets, accompanied by symbols of her defeat. The story Rome wanted remembered was carefully constructed: a dangerous foreign queen, a tragic suicide, a victory that justified the transformation of the Roman Republic into the empire Octavian would soon rule as Augustus. Meanwhile, Cleopatra's surviving children were taken to Rome and raised under imperial supervision. Caesarion, the son she had hoped to protect, was executed shortly after her death. In political terms, the outcome was complete. Egypt became a Roman province. Its immense wealth flowed directly into the imperial treasury, and Octavian's power grew stronger than any Roman leader before him. But the story of Cleopatra's final days endures because it reveals something deeper about how power works. Empires rarely settle for simple victory. They shape memory. They design narratives. They decide which versions of events survive long enough to become history. In that struggle, Cleopatra lost almost everything: her kingdom, her dynasty, even the future she tried to secure for her children. Yet in the final moment of her life, she made one decision that Rome could not entirely dictate. She chose how the story ended. 2,000 years later, the palace where she spent those last days has vanished beneath the waters of Alexandria's harbour. The rooms are gone. The walls that confined her no longer exist. Only fragments remain in ancient texts, and in the enduring question her death left behind. Was Cleopatra's final act a victory, or simply the last gesture of a defeated queen? History has never agreed, and perhaps it never will. If you enjoy exploring the hidden tensions, forgotten choices, and unsettling realities behind famous moments in history, consider subscribing for more deeply researched historical documentaries. And let me know in the comments which empire, ruler, or historical mystery we should uncover next.